of all, Minister, let me say that I'm very surprised to hear that you did not follow Chrystia Freeland's advice and cancel your Disney Plus subscription to help balance your household budget. I also did not take her advice because I too like The Mandalorian.
This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Because of the work that's been done with C11 and the C18, the CRTC is going to have a huge amount of work to do. But I noticed in the estimates that they've not been given any additional money in this budget, and there are words there that suggest additional money could be added. So can you give us an idea of how much it will cost for the CRTC to fully implement the provisions of C11 and C18 when it gets royal assent?
For the question, and I agree with you that C11, C18 are major steps, and the CRTC will be playing an important role. I remember that we put in place an additional amount for, I think, was $1.9 million for the CRTC regarding C18. As for the rest, we have to see exactly where we go in terms of regulations and the amount of work that's going to be done, but the CRTC will be fully funded for that, and they're confident that they can do the job on both bills.
Thank you. So we don't really know yet how much that will cost. Now, I remember, Minister, the last time you were here, we were talking about the policy criteria that would be given to the CRTC to determine, which content would be sort of upvoted and which would be buried. And you said that we would see that policy directive or criteria in due time. Now, Parliament has not seen that, but the CRTC has begun their consultations. So I'm sure that they wouldn't be starting consultations without a direction. Have they been given the policy directive and criteria? And if so, can it be given to us? And if not, why are they consulting without a directive, I guess would be the question.
No, they didn't receive it, Madam Gladue. We're finalizing, and it's no question of a few weeks, shouldn't be very long. I'm finalizing the draft version of the policy direction. Then, as you know, it will be sent for consultation, very important. Then after the consultation, we draft the final version, which is sent to the CRTC. Then they will adapt the work based on that, and they will go on with drafting the regulations, consulting, and then finalizing the regulations. So in the next steps, there will be a lot of regulation, which is a good thing.
Certainly they need to have criteria, and I guess my concern is that before they've consulted and before they've received a policy directive and criteria from the government, the CRTC is already considering decisions about whether or not they're going to allow the streaming of certain U.S. news outlets to Canadians. This was a concern of President Biden that perhaps the C11 would result in something that would violate the U.S. Canadian Free Trade Agreement. And so what would you say to Canadians that are concerned that the CRTC may be already starting to talk about what things they can see and what things they can't see?
Well, the bill is Ms. Gladue, with all due respect, it's not about what Canadians can see or not see. C11 is basically doing two things, asking the streamers that we all love, the Disney, Netflix, and others, to contribute to the creation of Canadian content, and also to make sure that what we produce, which is great music, great films, that is easier to find. But it has nothing to do on us getting involved in the content. And the CRTC already said that they're not interested in the content.
Well, that's right, but they've put on the public record that they're considering not allowing a certain U.S. news organization to stream to Canada. So that is telling people what they can see and what they cannot see. And I know the Senate had brought amendments to say, let's exclude, user content, individual user content from the bill, and the government rejected it. They also brought amendments to say that Cabinet shouldn't be able to direct the CRTC on how they should screen or prioritize content that Canadians can see, and that was also rejected. Can you explain to Canadians why you didn't exclude individual content and why you didn't take away the power for Cabinet to direct the CRTC with what to bury?
Because C11 is already not about content. For example, as a user, none of us will see any difference, like when you're a user. And if you're producing stuff for the internet, it's not about you. It's about the platform. Even if what you do is great, and we have some of the best content in the world, but C11 only gives obligations to the platforms, not a single obligation to the content creators, and we made sure of that. But I'll be even more specific in my directive to make sure that it's really understood, but already the bill says it. It's only about the streamers contributing to our culture.
Well, thank you, Minister. Let's talk a little bit then about the Canadian Media Fund. I see in the National Post today that there are diversity and inclusion quotas that are being put into the Canadian Media Fund. Now, we did see from your government with the Canada Summer Jobs Program that people who did not ascribe to the Liberal ideology and sign the attestation were not eligible for funding. So I worry when I see diversity and inclusion identity quotas. Could you reassure Canadians that it's not going to be another attempt to make sure that people that don't ascribe to the government's ideology don't get funding?
We would never do that. I don't.
Well, Minister, to be fair, that was done under the Canada Summer Jobs, and there was lawsuits that went. Redeemer University won their lawsuit against the government for being discriminated underneath that program. So people are concerned to make sure that the Canadian Media Fund isn't going to discriminate against media organizations, perhaps that don't line up with the government's ideology.
The CMF is doing an amazing job helping the production of our content for television, for a lot of stuff. And
we're over time, so if you, Minister, we're over time, so if you could just wrap up.
Okay, sorry. So we're talking about the 40 million, which is over 2 years, 2020, and this will support the creation of more French content and make sure that some people that we never have the chance to see will be seen a little bit more.
I want to just go back to what my colleague was talking about on C11, and particularly with regards to the CRTC consultation. And it says that they are going to consult on what constitutes a social media service. So I want to ask you, can you define what constitutes a social media service?
You mean what the platforms are?
Yeah.
Platforms that are there on the internet, used by people, by Canadians, and people all over the world.
Okay, so if it was so easy for you to define that, why is the CRTC consulting, and why isn't it in the bill?
Oh, why they do that? You have to ask the CRTC. They're independent. What I'm going to do very soon is send a set of directives. They're going to be consulting. I'll be consulting on that, then sending them the final version, and they'll be consulting on their own. There
is no doubt going to be a discussion about whether aspects of certain social media services will be covered by the streaming, covered by the Online Streaming Act. So, look, why not put the definition right in the bill, or why not accept Clause 4 to keep user-generated content out of the legislation? Why not just accept those regulations?
But, Ms. Lassman, it is out of the scope of the bill, and there'll be more precision in my policy directive. But once again, a lot of people said, oh, this will affect user-generated content, but there's no obligation on them. The obligations are only on the platforms. It's about the platforms, not the users or the creators.
So if you're certain about that, why not include it in legislation so it's not in regulation, to give people the certainty that it won't be included? Because this is not coming just from this committee. This is coming from a wide array of creators who are concerned about the very same thing. And you've got that amendment from the Senate. So why not include it unless there's another agenda?
No, but that's where your party, not you personally, but the party and us, we disagree, because we think that with the bill as is, it is excluded. They're excluded. They're totally excluded. And we said it, and the CRTC said it. There's no interest on the content, even if the content is great. But imagine, I said it, millions of videos uploaded every day. Who would be watching them if they were interested in the content? No one could, even if they were interested. But they're not. The only thing we need to know is what are the revenues, so we can base on that to say, okay, that platform has to contribute a certain percentage or amount to the creation of Canadian culture.
So the way that you defined it, though, the user platforms like YouTube or Facebook, along with their content, are included in your understanding. But the claim, the claim that the user content on these outlets somehow won't be impacted by C11, that's the claim that you're making. How do you square that circle?
But I don't see Facebook included in this. YouTube could be, because sometimes people upload exactly the same thing that you would get on Spotify, for example, the same song. So if it's treated one way on Spotify, it should be treated the same way on YouTube. That's it. But on the rest, I don't think that's scoping
So
anyone else.
you can understand why this is confusing. Again, why not include it in the bill?
Because the bill is clear. The bill excludes them. That's why we had that discussion for over a year now.
It's
we
clear as
disagree
mud,
on.
but I'm going to move on.
We respectfully disagree on that.
It's not really a disagreement. It's just that it's not clear. Minister, I want to go back to the case of Laith Maruth. That's the consultant who got at least $133,000 from the ministry that took over a month to do anything about, or frankly acknowledge from your office. So I want to know if that $133,000 has been paid back.
I'll turn to Madame Mondou, because the same way that this was under me the first time, I was Minister of Canadian Heritage and Multiculturalism. I'm not Minister of Multiculturalism anymore. It's Mr. Hussein, so I'll turn to Madame Mondou.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we are in recovery, and we are using two avenues. The first one is a recovery agency, and the other one is the CRA.
So still it hasn't been paid back. Has anybody faced consequences for hiring Laith Maruth? Has anybody been fired in a regular job, in a regular place? If you do something like that, there are consequences. Has anybody in the ministry at all faced consequences for the vile anti-Semitism and funding it by funding Laith Maruth?
So just to be clear, he was not hired by the department. The organization that hired him was receiving funding from the department. So he was not hired by the department. I think my colleague Maya has been here to explain that actually a lot of measures have been put in place to try to avoid that kind of event in the future, including by better screening, including by better monitoring, and also training. So people have been also provided on training. I have to say, in all honesty, that we are producing, I think the minister say 1.7 billion a year of Gs&C, and we have a lot of employees who are very, very devoted to do their work, and they do their best. Having said that, I am personally sorry for what happened, and I'm very, very, I can tell you that everybody in the department has been extremely, extremely sorry by it.